and welcome to a slightly over-processed edition of Ben's Junk. Well, first off, I need to thank my Facebook friend Seth for sending me this 1985-ish Archer video stabilizer. And of course, Archer was one of Radio Shack's so-called house brands, which were invariably made by other major companies and just had a Radio Shack brand name slapped on it. Because at the time, Radio Shack didn't like outside company names on the merchandise they sold. But anyway, before we begin, let me say that in the greater scheme of things, this is a pretty dull piece of gear to try and demonstrate. Actually, it's one of the most dull ones I've ever done. As such, unlike most Ben's Junk videos, this one's going to be a bit more of a history lesson than usual. I want to take the opportunity to talk just a bit about the idiosyncrasies of early pre-recorded home video, specifically the tape-based stuff. So anyway, getting started here, as best as I can gather, these were introduced no later than in the spring of 1984. I found a Radio Shack ad from May of '84 touting their line of video accessories, of which today's item is one. And of course, you could build a small wall of boxes just to tweak the look of your video stuff. Now, I believe this particular unit dates to no later than 1985, and that's kind of a significant date, but I'll get to that. Now, this particular product was kind of notorious for one thing: bypassing copy protection, at least the early stuff, even if that wasn't the intent. Now, in the at least earlier days of mass-manufactured, pre-recorded home video cassette releases, sometimes the studios would intentionally somewhat cripple the video quality of their releases. Most commonly, they'd dink around with the vertical sync, which would cause the picture to roll on a lot of, especially earlier VHS decks and on a lot of TVs in general. But the point of these video stabilizers was, as implied, to stop that kind of stuff from happening to people, legally watching their own tapes, or at least ones they'd rented. And this process was called stop copy. And the idea was that the signal would be too weak and unstable to dub to another tape, and stop piracy, stop copy. Now, of course, that meant sometimes coming at the expense of a few people not being able to legitimately, legally watch their own tapes. And this, if you will, system, it's a pretty loose system, was in sporadic use from about 1978 up to about 85. Most tape-based home video releases of this period do not specify whether or not they have stop copy. Now, if you've got an old major release tape that kind of bobs up and down a bit when you try and watch it, odds are it has stop copy. Now, having said that, the only tapes that I can just about guarantee have stop copy are from this line of rental-only tapes that you could get from Photomat, if you remember the old photo developing kiosks, and at $12 a pop at the time, from about 1979 to 82. And as you've already seen, this does have stop copy. And as far as I know, all of the Photomat tapes, VHS and Betamax, have stop copy. Now, another company that was known to use it was the big boy of home video at the time, and that would be Magnetic Video. But specifically, I'm talking about their line of tapes from 1978. So I believe the second wave of titles they put out. So this is a 78 title, if I can make the camera focus. And I've only got 2 of these, the other being a copy of Von Ryan's Express. But as far as I know, none of the 2 that I have anything. There's certainly no evidence of it. Now, conversely, Warner Brothers tapes don't seem to have any on them at all, particularly the ones released when they were still calling themselves WCI Home Video, Warner Communications Incorporated, like this copy of Bonnie and Clyde. And for what it's worth, this is a beta tape. But these are kind of infamous in their own way just for having really ratty looking transfers of most movies, and this copy of Bonnie and Clyde is certainly no exception. Now, to answer the big burning question, yes, the Archer will nullify stop copy, but so will most VCRs from probably the mid-late 80s on, certainly 4-head or better. But having said that, my VHS decks, which are all from the mid and late 90s, handle stop copy just fine without the need for any extra gear, rendering the Archer completely moot. Now, as for Macrovision copy protection, the most famous form of copy protection, that was introduced in 1985. I mentioned that date earlier. And of course, it's still used now, as of the making of this episode at least. But there were rumors that you could bypass Macrovision with this, and that made these a little bit of a hot property for a while. And I will tell you that, yeah, the Archer can at least mellow out Macrovision. I admit, I did my due diligence with this one. I tried transferring a couple minutes apiece of Macrovision encoded VHS and DVD to VHS, trying to stay at least a little bit period appropriate. And I will tell you that the picture still dips a bit, but it's not terrible. It's still watchable. Whereas if you tried to dub a Macrovision encoded, certainly tape without the Archer, if you've ever tried to watch a dub of a Macrovision tape, the brightness levels are all over the place. And in my case, it dips so severely that it cuts out completely. And at other times, it's completely blown out. But having said that, the only reason I could think of that anyone would want to dub a tape that was high enough on the commercial totem pole to even have something like Macrovision or even stop copy in the first place would be to back up that one title in your collection that hasn't been reissued and usually for legal reasons may never be reissued. Or it gets reissued but some of the music gets changed, or is that kind of stuff. But anyway, getting back to the Archer, as I said at the top of the episode, there really isn't much to it. It's a pretty dull thing to see in action. The most unique feature is a movable split screen function, which allows you to compare and contrast in real time between the raw tape and your own added processing. And that processing consists of adding some really terrible extra video noise, or trying to smooth out a noisy tape, and you can actually cancel out your own efforts with these 2 knobs. And aside from that, there's a low-level editing function you can do, a real basic one. You can put a fade to black on a tape that you're recording. So, I don't know, say you're recording something off the TV and you want to cut out the commercials, but you want to be at least a little graceful, you can fade to black. Haven't had much luck fading back in. I guess it's supposed to do it, but I just haven't had much luck with that one. And aside from that, this is also an A-B switch. So what you got are 2 inputs and 2 outputs, all composite, and you also have a coax output, cable TV style coax. So this is also an RF modulator. So if you've got, certainly back then, an older TV or a cheaper TV that didn't have composite inputs, you could run your stuff through here. But really, that's about it. So, having said that, let's close things out on the single most anticlimactic note you could imagine. But nonetheless, I hope you at least learned something here. But let's close out on some footage of this sucker in action, and it's not very exciting. I'll talk to you again soon.
I believe we will have the declaration of a national emergency. I think we'll have martial law by this time next year. I don't think there will be New Year's Eve celebrations like we have seen them in the past, because I think there will be troops in the street. I believe we will have the declaration of a national emergency. I think we'll have martial law by this time next year. I don't think there will be New Year's Eve celebrations like we have seen them in the past.
Hi, Roxy. What are you doing in town? Thought I was supposed to meet you up at the club.
Well, you still are. I just bought myself a new swimming suit tonight.
Oh?
Yes. See?
Well, I get off work in 10 minutes.
Follow me out then.
Follow you? Listen, I can change clothes and beat you out there. That's my girl.